Hello, beautiful humans, and welcome back, or welcome if it's your first time. Today, Saturn is moving into Aries, and the Sun has moved into Human Design Gate 30, the gate of clinging fire. And today, after hearing something earlier this week on a podcast, I want to bring us into conversation about a word. It's not a new word, it's an old one that most of us, if we're honest, flinch when we hear it, and that word is martyr. And I know there's a little internal no thank you, especially if you have a line 3 in your human design profile like I do, because that is the traditional name for that line. And I was listening to one of my astrology teachers unpack this word recently, and something shifted a little bit for me, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. And in typical generator fashion, I thought I would bring it to the podcast. So stay with me here, because by the end of this episode, I want to give you a couple of things. First, a reframe of this word, and maybe of yourself, especially if you have the line 3. Second is a different way of understanding what Neptune and Saturn moving into Aries is actually asking of us, because a lot of people are talking about the term spiritual warrior right now. And although, in fact, I think I've even mentioned spiritual warrior, and I think that's true, but I also think it's incomplete. And third, I want to give you 3 specific things to watch for in yourself during the Sun in the clinging fire transit. And I think one of those might surprise you. But first, the word. The English word martyr comes from the Greek word martus. And martus doesn't mean someone who suffers. It doesn't mean someone who dies for a cause. It doesn't even mean someone who makes everyone feel quietly guilty around them, although we probably all know that person. It means, quite simply, to be a witness in truth. Someone who sees something and reports on what they've seen. The original martyr wasn't defined by suffering at all. They were defined by a refusal to deny what they had seen or known to be true. Now, suffering does enter the story later on. It comes mostly, I think, from the Christian church history and persecution, when early witnesses refused to recant what they had seen and known. That's when the suffering part got interjected into the definition. Not because they sought it, not because they were attached to pain, but because the world around them couldn't tolerate their refusal to lie. But suffering was never the point. The witnessing was the point. And even in the people that we associate with martyr, that is the positioning, is the witnessing of standing in the truth. And I feel like this matters. It really matters, because somewhere along the way we took that story and we sort of flipped it inside out. We created what we now call the martyr complex. And the martyr complex is almost the exact opposite of the original meaning. The martyr complex is about performing suffering. It's about using pain as currency, as leverage, as identity, as a way of quietly demanding to be seen. It needs an audience. It needs you to know how much they're enduring. The original martyr, they don't need you to see it. They're not doing it at you. There's actually, in some ways, a profound peacefulness to it. The quality of, I stand in something, I speak it, I won't deny it, but I also don't need to convince you or overpower you. I'm just not going to lie about what I know. And that's it. That's the whole position. And when I tell you that, for me, this is the exact energy that Neptune and Saturn in Aries is calling us towards right now, and why I think the truest expression of this moment isn't the dramatic spiritual warrior. I think it's the rise of the everyday hero. So let's talk about the spiritual warrior, because I don't want to dismiss it. The energy is real. And Saturn, in particular, with Neptune moving through Aries, it's initiatory fire. Aries is all about initiation. It's the energy of someone who has done the inner work and is now being asked to stand for something in the world, to stop waiting, to stop hedging, to plant a flag, so to speak. And Aries doesn't whisper, Aries charges. So there's something very warrior-like in this moment. There is a call to courage, a call to stop apologizing for what you know and what you believe, to stop making yourself smaller so that other people are comfortable. That's very real, and that's here, and I feel it. I've felt the build-up for quite some time. Spiritual warrior, as we tend to use it, however, as a concept, as an identity, as something that you can decide, still sort of has that cape on it somewhere, like the Superman figure. Think about the image for a moment. It sounds dramatic. It also has like a before and after. Like there's a battle, there's a victory, a story worth telling. There's usually an audience, even if the audience is just the version of yourself watching from a distance. It's nodding that approval about how far you've come. And I feel like this is where some of the performance can sneak in. And the first thing I'd watch for during this particular transit is, where are you performing your devotion rather than living it? I think it's going to be a very interesting next couple of years to see what happens to guru culture, to influencer culture, because I do think that we're going to see a lot of shifts there. I think that we're going to see a lot of people that fall out, that aren't walking their walk. And the Aries shadow, especially with Neptune involved, is that spiritual glamour. It can be that version of yourself who's thinks they're on a mission, thinks they're doing important work, and the vision might not necessarily be wrong, but it can become like a costume. It can become a way of feeling devoted without actually doing the quiet and glamorous, nobody's watching work that devotion actually requires. Neptune dissolves. That's its job. And one of the things about Neptune and Aries and what it's going to dissolve and going to keep dissolving for anyone paying attention is the difference between the story that you tell about your spiritual life and the actual texture on a Wednesday morning when you're tired and nobody's watching. Saturn, on the other hand, asks for form. Saturn asks, what does this actually look like in your life? Not the vision of your life, not your Instagram capture of your life, the actual physical embodied Tuesday morning reality of your life. And I think this is where the spiritual warrior framing can, sort of let us off the hook, because warriors have, like I said, they have battles, and battles by definition are episodic. You gear up, you fight, you recover, you gear up again. And that's a rhythm and release. And there's a reason for that intensity, and there's a reason for rest. But I feel like what Saturn and Aries is asking for is, this isn't necessarily just a series of battles. It's a practice. And practices don't look particularly heroic. Practices look like showing up again on the day where you least want to. Practices look like the same thing done over and over again with no fanfare, with no finish line. They look like your typical Tuesday. And I thought about the monk's walk for peace, and where outside looking in, there was a lot of fanfare this week when they went into, there was a lot of fanfare as they made their journey from, I think it was Texas, at each stop for the people that were observing. But the monks themselves, it was the chop wood, carry water type of energy that they were bringing through with their purpose and their devotion. And when they arrived at the culmination point in DC, there, again, lots of cameras, lots of pictures. But what Adam said was the heroism of our time doesn't look like a dramatic entrance into a capital city. It looks like daily practice. It looks like daily care. It looks like the daily return. And I agree. And I also agree with him when he said, he's like, and that's what the monks would probably likely tell you. And I thought that's a super interesting way of looking at it. I also thought it was really interesting that the monks arrived in DC the same day that Venus entered into Pisces. And Venus is all about devotion, especially in Pisces because it's exalted in Pisces. And I thought that was a perfect timing moment. So I'm not here to take away the spiritual warrior from you. That energy is real and it belongs to this moment. But what I want to suggest is that what we're really being asked to grow into is something that contains the warrior, integrates the warrior, and then goes further. Because the everyday hero doesn't leave the spiritual warrior behind. They carry that energy with them everywhere, into the ordinary, into the unglamorous, into the Tuesday. The warrior energy becomes so fully integrated that it stops needing a battle to prove itself. It stops needing an audience. It stops needing a dramatic occasion to justify showing up. It just shows up because that's who they are now. And you probably already know someone like that. Maybe you caught glimpses of that in yourself, that quiet, unshakable quality in a person who's done the real work, not necessarily the person who talks the loudest about their journey, it's the one that keeps going, who keeps returning, who keeps choosing in the small and private moments of their life to be who they say they are. That's the everyday hero. That's, I think, where the original meaning of martyr was pointing to all along. Now, I'm a 3-5 in human design, and you know that is called the martyr. And when like I said earlier, when I sat with it, I didn't want anything to do with that. I didn't want that word anywhere near my identity. It felt heavy. It felt like a life sentence of struggle. Like the universe was essentially saying, congratulations, here, your role in life is to suffer meaningfully. And I thought, absolutely not. So, I did what a lot of line 3s typically do. I worked around it. I focused on other parts of my profile. I appreciated the line 3 gifts about lived wisdom, the trial and error, the experimentation. I loved all that. And I just sort of set the works aside. In fact, most of the time I call it the experimenter. I don't even call it the martyr. But now that I've been sitting with this original meaning, there was like a little bit of a recognition of a shift that I had already made. Because when he traced that word back to its origin, back to the person who simply refused to deny what they had seen and known to be true, that word doesn't feel heavy anymore. Because that's exactly what the line 3 does. The line 3 learns by living, by experimenting, by touching the fire, by gathering information, by trying it differently again. And the line 3 accumulates testimony, not from books, not from theory, but the actual living and doing the thing, right? Every experiment doesn't work out as planned. I can assure you of that. It's every relationship that taught you something that you couldn't learn any other way. Every time that you tried something and it fell apart and you sat in the rubble and thought, well, okay, now what? I know something I didn't know before. That's typical line 3. And that's not suffering. That's witnessing. It's witnessing. Your life as a line 3 is literally designed to become a testimony of sorts. Not to your failures, not to your struggles, but what you have seen and know to be true in your bones because you were there. And now I want to add another layer here, because this particular transit with Saturn moving into Aries is not very abstract for me, because I am now entering in my second Saturn return. And I have an Aries stellium. I have multiple planets in Aries in my 10th house. So when Saturn moves in Aries, it's not just passing through my neighborhood, it's coming home. And it's returning to the sign and the house where it already lives in my natal chart. And the 10th house is the house of legacy or vocation. And it's the contribution you're here to make in the world. And it is the most public part of your chart. It's the part that faces outward, that gets seen, that leaves something behind. And having Saturn there natally means that my relationship with structure, with discipline, and what I'm actually building in this lifetime, it's always been pretty serious. Like, I've always taken that in the various iterations of my career. I've taken it very serious. And it's always been through a lot of hard work. And that just comes with it. Saturn in Aries, it's in its fall, and a lot of people just sort of go ugh about that, but it's all I've known. so all the hype out there in the pop astro world about, oh my god, this is my life, guys. So you either do the work or you feel the weight of not doing it. Like, that is Saturn in Aries, and I know I can tell you for the fact that's true. It is a reckoning if you don't do the work. There's no shortcuts because Saturn is concerned about what it can build over long term, what can stand the test of time. You can't sidestep that. And then right underneath all of this is Human Design Gate 30, the clinging fire. And the sun is moving, like I said, through this right now. And the shadow of Gate 30 is desire. And this is where it gets a little interesting for me when I read the gene keys on this one. For someone like me who has spent years in personal development, I found it interesting that desire was listed as the shadow, because in those spaces, desire is always the engine. Full stop. Get clear on your desires. Amplify your desires. Let your desires lead you. Desire was couched as the hero of the whole story. And I worked with that framework for years. I got really good at knowing this is what I want and going after it with everything I had. And when I opened up the gene keys, and I found that in Gate 30, and I want to be careful here, because I'm not saying that the personal development teachers that I had were wrong, and I'm not even saying that when I taught it was wrong. Desire is a signal. It does point towards something true, but I think that the gene keys shadow here is making a more subtle distinction, and that is, once you see it, you can't unsee it. The shadow of desire in Gate 30 isn't about wanting things. It's about a specific relationship to wanting. It's the restless, grasping, never quite satisfied hunger that keeps moving the finish line. And that fire needs to keep consuming to feel real. And that part of you that achieves the thing and then immediately pivots to the next thing without ever landing in what you built is the issue. And for those of us who have a lot of Aries fire like I do, especially with Saturn in the 10th and Mars, with that relentless orientation towards legacy and contribution about what we're leaving behind, the desire shadow can look like a drive that never feels enough, like a hunger that your whole personal development practice kept feeding but never quite transforming. And also it's, well, I gotta learn more. There's a lot of proving energy into it, because the move isn't to amplify the desire. The move is to follow it all the way through to what it's actually pointing at. And what is it pointing at? Well, the gift frequency of Gate 30 is lightness. It's not the absence of fire. It's not the extinguishing of desire. But the fire has stopped grasping. The fire has stopped needing to devour and consume to prove it's real. And there's some teaching out there in one of the older books. I don't remember who it was. It might have been Napoleon Hill, that talks about the magnificent obsession and knowing what your magnificent obsession is. When I think about that, the word obsession to me still has that consuming, devouring fire element to it. And I think it's more about finding a magnificent devotion, that fire that burns steadily and warmly and faithfully because it's found its form, because it trusts what is enough. And when I put all of this together, the Martyr reframe, the Saturn return, the Gate 30 map, I think that for me, it was like the story that I was carrying, that the hard parts of my life were evidence of something going wrong, that these experiments didn't work, were something to apologize or explain for. I think I've done that in the past. But when I think about it, about the experiments, were just witnessing, and desire was always pointing to somewhere true, somewhere where there was a place that gets more light because of devotion. I think that's a really beautiful place to land. And I think that's like the line 3 redeem, because that's the martyr reclaimed. And that's gate 30, moving from the shadow into the gift. And I think that's the exact energy that Saturn and Aries is asking all of us to step into right now. Not the performance of a spiritual life, but being in devotion as a witness and testimony of one. So let's talk about what that might look like, not in theory, but, in your actual life. Because I think one of the most quietly radical things Saturn and Aries is asking us right now is to stop waiting for a moment worthy of devotion, to stop saving our best selves for occasions that feel significant enough for you to justify it. The everyday hero doesn't wait for the right conditions. They've already decided, and that decision shows up not in grand gestures, but the 10,000 small ones that no one ever sees or counts. Let's give 3 scenarios here. The first one is the person who shows up in their spiritual practice and is unseen because no one's watching. Not because they're going to post about it, not because they're in a season of peak inspiration where everything feels alive and meaningful, a la psychedelic experience, but because they said they would, because they've seen enough, they've lived enough, they know enough to understand that practice is the point, not the feeling that the practice sometimes produces, because you don't get peak state every time. You just don't. This is the person that gets up on the morning when they least want to. They sit with the discomfort of a practice that may feel dry or even mechanical, and miles away from the transcendent space that they felt maybe last week, and they do it anyway. Not dramatically, just consistently. That's clinging fire. That's gate 30 at its gift frequency. The fire that doesn't need to blaze still. The fire that has learned to trust its own warmth, even when you can't feel the heat sometimes. And some days you can't. Second picture, I would say, is a caretaker. The person who gets up in the middle of the night for the 4th time. The person caring for the aging parent or sick partner, or even a friend that's falling apart. The meals, the appointments, the emotional holding, the thousands of acts of love that leave no trace or sometimes even earn no recognition. Our culture doesn't have a great language for that sacrifice. The soldier, the activist, the person who gives everything in a single moment, in a single defining moment. And I'm not diminishing that, but heroism. A caregiver's heroism is different. It's not in a single moment. It's in the same moment, chosen over and over and over, in the ordinary, in the exhaustion, and in the thankless. And in a way that makes it the heroic in the truest sense, in the Martas sense. We've seen something about love and being that you can't learn from a book or a course or a weekend retreat. They know it because they're living it in the now. And that's being a witness, whether they ever name that or not. And then the third is maybe the quietest. It's the person holding their truth in a very, very loud world. Not shouting it, not performing it, not building a brand around it, just not betraying it. The person who knows what they know about what matters and how they want to move through the world, about what they are no longer willing to pretend that's okay, and the one that lets that knowing quietly shape every decision that they make. This is the original martyr in the purest form. Not the suffering, not the drama, just the simple, brave, daily refusal to gaslight themselves into bullshit about what they've seen. In a world that's very loud right now, very insistent, very polarized, very invested in telling you what to think and feel and want and fear, the person who can stay quietly rooted in their own knowing is genuinely doing something countercultural and something genuinely heroic. Now, I promised you 3 things to watch for during this transit, and I think they're going to be useful over the next months as Saturn settles into Aries. I think they will transcend even the Sun transit into gate 30. And the first is to watch out where you're performing your devotion rather than living it. We touched on this in the spiritual warrior conversation. The cape, the glamour, the subtle audience that you keep for yourself. But it's genuinely hard to see in yourself sometimes. It tends to show up as kind of restlessness, a feeling that you're not doing enough, it's not visible enough, it's not significant enough, a hunger to be further along, more evolved, more recognized for your growth. And when you feel that restless, ask yourself, am I doing this or am I performing it? Am I in practice or am I watching myself do the practice? Because the everyday hero doesn't have an audience. It's not even an internal one. And the second one is to watch for the moments you gaslight yourself about what you know to be true. And this one's a little subtle, and it is everywhere. It's the moment you talk yourself out of something you clearly felt, the moment you defer to someone else's version of reality over your own direct response, the moment you decide what you saw, what you felt, what you know is it was wrong or it was too much or not worth the friction of standing in it. The original martyr, the witness, is someone who has decided not to do this anymore. Not loudly, not as a statement, just quiet daily practice of not lying to yourself. Neptune in Aries can make this kind of slippery right now. Neptune likes to dissolve boundaries, including the boundary of what you actually know and what you've been convinced to believe. I think a couple of episodes back I mentioned that one of the driving questions of 2026 should be for you, is this real or not? Is this true or not? So stay close to your own direct experience. Trust what you've lived. That's your testimony. And don't give that away. I have said many times on the podcast, know what hills you're willing to die on. Reevaluate those hills on the regular, because people grow and people change. And the third thing to watch for, and I think this might actually surprise you, is the small daily acts that you're dismissing are not enough. The practice that you showed up to this morning, the meal you made, the truth you held quietly, the person you kept showing up for, that thing you did, that same thing chosen again with no audience, no applause, no guarantee it was making any difference at all. you're dismissing these things. I know you all are, because we all are. Because we've been trained by a culture of highlight reels and dramatic transformations to see the ordinary as evidence of stagnation sometimes, as proof that nothing significant is happening. But in Saturn and Aries is asking you to look at it again, because what if those small daily acts, the ones that feel like nothing, the ones that leave no trace, what if those are the whole thing? What if that is what devotion actually looked like? What if that's what devotion actually looks like when it's real? What if your Tuesday is already full of testimony to something that's true about who you are and what you're building and what you refuse to stop caring about? The everyday hero is not waiting to be seen. They're already here. They're already showing up, already quietly refusing to deny what they know. And that is the clinging fire. That is gate 30, moving from desire into lightness. That is Saturn and Aries already doing the real work, and not asking you to charge into battle, but asking you to be fully and faithfully and without apology exactly who the highest version of yourself is on that Tuesday, in the ordinary, in the unseen. So that's where I want to leave you. Not with a homework list. So here's where I want to leave you. Not with a homework list, not with a 10-step plan, just something simple and real for you to sit with. I want you to think about devotion, not the concept of it, not the Instagram version of it, with the morning routine and the perfectly lit candle and the journal that looks like it probably belongs in a magazine. Mine has crap all over it. The real version, the lived version, the version of you that shows up in those quiet, unremarkable moments of an ordinary week. Because most of us, but here's what I've noticed, and maybe you've noticed this too. Most of us aren't struggling to honor our devotion. Most of us have lost the plot on what we're even devoted to in the first place. We're busy, we're productive, we're moving. But if you stopped right now, really stopped and asked yourself, okay, what am I actually devoted to? Can you answer that clearly? Not what you think you should be devoted to, not what you used to be devoted to, not what looks good or sounds right for the highlight reel. What is actually genuinely, quietly on fire in you right now? Because that's what Saturn and Aries is going to be asking. Not are you working hard enough? Not are you being brave enough? But have you found the form for your faith yet? Have you located the thing you cannot stop returning to, cannot stop caring about, cannot stop showing up for, even when it costs you something and nobody's watching, and there's no guarantee that it'll make a huge, big difference at all? No viral moment. That's clinging fire. That's gate 30 as the gift. Not the restless energy wanting to keep moving the finish line. The steady, faithful warmth of a fire that has found what it loves and simply refuses to leave it. And if you've lost that thread, I've been sitting with this for the last couple of months. If you're honest enough with yourself to say, I don't actually know what I'm devoted to right now, that's not a failure. And it might have changed. With all these outer planets in the last year changing signs, it probably has. That's not evidence of something that's gone wrong. That is sort of like a line 3 sitting in the rubble of an experiment, gathering the data, going, all right, what do I do with this now? It's the beginning of the witnessing. So the question I want to leave you with this week, the one I want you to sit with, maybe write about, maybe just carry it into your Tuesday. Actually, it's 3 questions. Just work with me here. Where does devotion live in your life right now? What's actually burning even quietly, even small right now? And where do you want more of it? You don't have it all. You do not have to have it all figured out. The everyday hero doesn't have it all figured out. They're just someone who keeps asking the questions, who keeps finding the fire, who keeps returning to it, who keeps tending to it on a Tuesday in the ordinary and the unseen, because they've seen something they can't unsee. The acts that feel like the smallest are often the ones that travel the furthest. The person who rolls up their sleeves and gives blood and never knows whose life it saves. The one who shows up on a Saturday morning at the wildlife rehab center and holds a creature, or maybe even just sweeps cages. The volunteer at the food pantry who hands someone a bag of groceries and offers them some dignity without even knowing, what the story is. The artist who makes the thing anyway. That's really important. I've seen a lot of creative people going, ooh, should I be making art right now? Hell yeah. We need more beauty in this world. That's an act of devotion. Because the making itself is a testimony. These acts don't trend, they don't go viral. Sometimes they don't leave a trace in the places that we're trained to look for evidence of something meaningful is happening. But they do ripple. They always, always ripple. And sometimes it's potentially enormous, and sometimes it's just a whisper, and both are okay. So, if you have found this helpful, please share it out. Thank you so much for being here, for listening, for showing up to this, which in itself is a small act of devotion that I don't take lightly. See you next time. And for those who are waiting on the next episode for the Human Design Authority and Natal Moon, that will be coming out tomorrow. And then next week we have Mental, I think, and Lunar after that. In the interim, remember to find beauty every day and seek the magic in the mundane.